Your comments, as always, have been instructive, have been helpful, and I really appreciate all the kind thoughts that you guys have shared. Hi, folks. Tony DeWitt again with another video on the law. Remember, I don't dispense legal advice here, and this is what we're talking about today. So, today I want to go through a few of the comments. Now, I wish I could go through literally all of them, but there are a lot on a lot of these different days that I've done in this Megan Boswell trial. And I've tried to do some of them, pull some of them out that I thought I could add some commentary or some context around that might be helpful or, inspirational for somebody. I don't know. But here we go with some of those comments. So Ken Olive says, JD, your take on this was very educational. He does feel compassion for Megan. What a awful young life that she had. And he talks about how she had to have, essentially some really serious hygiene performed on her at 16 when she was pregnant. And he said she had grandparents who surely taught her how to keep herself clean. Teenage girls usually have personal hygiene that's right at the top of their to-do list. He says this girl just confuses him. When you work in healthcare, you see a lot of different things. And one of the things about working in rural healthcare, whether it's rural Missouri, rural Illinois, rural Florida, wherever it is, what you learn is that people have a lot of different ideas about a lot of different things. And hygiene is sometimes one of them. And unfortunately, not everybody values a good bar of soap the way most of us normal people do. Unfortunately, that just becomes a lifestyle choice. I can remember going to take care of somebody's oxygen concentrator at their home because they complained it wasn't putting out enough oxygen and they felt like they were having air hunger. And when I got to that person's house and I knocked on the door and the door opened up, I was hit with a wave of stale grease smell, like maybe they had been cooking bacon nonstop for a year. And as I went in, surfaces in the home had grease caked on them, grease and dirt. And there were literally bugs on the floor. And, when that happens, you have to be non judgmental if you're a healthcare professional and say, well, this is their lifestyle choice. I have to respect that for what it is. So I don't say anything about that when I'm there, but did it gross me out? Absolutely, it did. And there wasn't anything wrong with the oxygen concentrator that a good cleaning and a little bit of Dawn wouldn't fix. So that's essentially what I did. I cleaned up their concentrator and suggested maybe they move it a little further away from the kitchen. That's the kind of thing that you see when you're in healthcare. And as a result of that, it has given me an appreciation, and I use that term sort of inadvisedly, I guess, but it has given me an appreciation for exactly what kind of person, what kind of family background this person came from. Now, that does not excuse in any shape, way, or form the conduct of this young lady toward her daughter. Her daughter deserved better than that. You know, my parents certainly could have done better for me. I could have done better as a parent for my own children, probably in numerous ways. And I'm sure that if they were there here to tell us, they would tell us exactly how I could have done a lot better. But the long and short of it is every parent has regrets, but 99.999995% of us don't have the kind of regrets that Megan Boswell has. That, I think, is an important thing to take note of. Some of the commenters were really, really incensed with the way this all came down. I get the compassion piece, but she did not murder anyone before this. No adults. She chose an innocent, defenseless child. She knew to lie about several others, knew that they would have consequences, knew people were looking for Evelyn. There was plenty of time for her to share the truth and that she knew. So she had a bad childhood, whether she had a bad child or not, she knew how to keep herself free and to roam until she couldn't, but she didn't have to go on indefinitely. It's a shame for any young person to spend the rest of their life in prison, but of course, that's exactly what she's going to wind up doing. And I understand being incensed in that way. And I found this comment pretty interesting. In an Ohio case, the ME and LE spoke for the victim. It was powerful. Sad no one spoke for Evelyn. Well, I think the prosecutors did speak for Evelyn, and I think that's their whole purpose for being there. You may not have appreciated their lack of passion, but I do think the young lady had a lot more passion for this case than the man did. I think, although based on their press conference, they certainly both seemed happy to get the result that they got. And then this next gentleman says that interesting how so many internet legal pundits said she would get off. Well, I think a lot of us drew comparisons to Casey Anthony, and you could sort of take a flyer on that and say, well, you might very well get off because they haven't nailed down the cause of death. And I can understand where they would do that early, but after you heard the testimony from the fingerprint examiner and from the forensic pathologist, it'd be hard for me to offer to anybody that she was going to get away from this, scot free. But here's the thing with legal pundits. Most of those legal pundits have never tried a case in Tennessee. In fact, most of them have never been to Tennessee. They have no idea what the mindset or culture of that community is. And although you can certainly have a lot of stereotypes about people in the South, one of the things that is probably stereotypically true is that they tend to have a great deal of religious faith. And they tend to believe that, for example, abortion is wrong. And as a result of that, they tend to prize their children. And a lot of them feel, in many ways, that the only way they will ever have met their goals as people and parents is to see their children prosper and do well. So when someone essentially abandons and throws away the precious gift from God that we get when we get a child, I think that had a lot bigger impact than those internet legal pundits really factored in to their analysis. But again, I don't dispute the fact that there was certainly some room there for there to be an acquittal on some of the charges. But she was always going to get convicted of something. And some of that has to do with the fact that it's Tennessee, but most of it just has to do with the fact that she was a serial liar and she attempted to be a master manipulator. And what she did is she talked and manipulated herself right into a prison cell for the rest of her life. And in this next comment, our poster says that regarding the defense attorney, well, I strongly disagree. And then he has some computer glitches there. But basically, he said he was overly aggressive and he feels like he crossed the line and that, his bullying of that witness was inappropriate and that essentially, whether his involvement regarding Megan, clearly it did in many respects cross a line, bearing in mind her addiction to manipulative deceit is one surprised. And I think he means that last part there as a question. I've said before that cross examination is an art, and it's not something really that gets taught in law school. You basically learn how to cross examine if somebody sits you down and says, okay, these are the rules, these are how you do it. And you plan for it and you work on it. And you also have to be able to go with the flow of cross examination. So there are some things that I think he probably did and could have done better, but that's the case in every trial. There are always things you go back on and say, man, I really wish I'd asked that question. But of course, you don't get a second chance. Did he cross the line? I don't think so. Because if I'd felt, I think that if the judge felt he was crossing the line, he would have rebuked him and said, hey, lower your voice. You are not addressing some hoodlum, you're addressing a doctor. I think that's what would have happened if he had crossed the line. I don't think he did. And as far as being in some way manipulated by this young lady, I'm sure to a certain extent that's true. I have had very good relationships with clients that I would have done pretty much anything for other than break the law, other than, lose my license. And a lot of times clients do try to manipulate you. Uh, that's just fact of life if you're an attorney. And for that matter, if you're a doctor or anything else, people do try to manipulate other people. And when that happens, you have to be smart enough to see it and smart enough not to let it happen. And I think Mr. Scott was certainly smart enough not to let it happen. I don't think any personal animus or personal interest interfered with his cross examination of the witnesses. And Heather Mickey says, I was annoyed nobody in the family even talked about Evelyn. They were only worried about Megan. That girl had so much support. She was spoiled in a lot of ways. I had a horrific childhood too, and I'm tired of that excuse being used. I feel sorry for Megan the child, but not Megan the mother. I think she makes a really good point there, that nobody from the family really even talked about Evelyn when they were asking for mercy for Megan, and that's absolutely accurate. I don't recall any mention of the child. Really, the only person who stood up for Evelyn was Tommy Boswell, who came in and essentially got the police involved to begin with. I think that's an important thing to remember, particularly as it relates to what the family did. And then we have this fellow who says he wouldn't want anybody deciding his fate or wouldn't want his fate decided by a bunch of hillbillies from Tennessee. Well, there's a simple solution to that. You just don't commit any crimes in Tennessee. But there are several posters here who kind of go after him for his comment. And it's okay, fair game to go after a comment. And I like the fact that one of them said it was a stupid comment. They didn't say he was a stupid person. He obviously has some issues with the way the jury decided the case. And I always try not to demonize people here on the channel because everybody's entitled to their opinion. You may not agree with it, but they're all going to have different opinions. And then this person says, it might have been wrong of the second ME, but I appreciated her mic drop moment at the end of their testimony. Watching from home, I got the gist of both ME's testimony, and I didn't like Mr. Scott's raised voice to the ME. A lot of people have felt that way, and many of the comments reflect that. I was never convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that this was murder versus an accident. That being said, based on what we do know for sure about Megan and her actions, I'm okay with her being locked up for a long time. And indeed, she will be. And Mr. Scott has seen some things in his career. There's no way he could have believed anything Megan told him, and he did his best. I wasn't a fan when he bludgeoned witnesses. Did they reject or just not get a plea before trial? I didn't see any reference to them getting a plea offer before trial. I think any competent attorney would have recommended to take the plea just to avoid the chance of prison without parole. As you all know, she got life in prison, but in Tennessee, that means she can be out in 51 years. And then this person says Megan's family life was awful. Megan could have let Evelyn go to adoption or foster care when she felt overwhelmed. I think that would have been a really good idea, particularly where she didn't really know who the father was and blamed a guy who had no part in it. Mr. Scott saw this sentence recommendation granted. The jury decided upon prison for life as opposed to life without parole for Megan Boswell. Again, I do think they granted mercy in large part because of the bad family environment that Megan Boswell had. And then the last one there, Megan's varying statements reminded me of Susan Smith. For what? A child subjected to a horrifying end at the hands of their mother so mama can have a new boyfriend. I got to tell you, it happens. It happens all the time. People do stupid things for what they think is love, and of course, it later turns out to be something else. And I always love it when people tell me things that I didn't know. I was surprised to see Megan's mother in civilian clothes, not jail stripes, but that says she was arrested after she got down off of her stand after her testimony. And I'm guessing that was because she had outstanding warrants, and indeed that's what someone says. But the thing I really wanted to address here is on the trial, the answer yes or no, or you be held in contempt moment with the medical examiner seemed so unusual and intense. It also seemed that the defense was very eager for a mistrial when a text somewhat showed Megan said instead of the text alone. Would love to have your thoughts. Well, here are my thoughts on that. I thought him pushing her to say answer only yes or no And then another one of my commenters told me that indeed the next day the judge did strike the answers that were non responsive. I personally thought that he should have done that earlier, probably because having let that sit in the jurors' minds overnight may actually have, and then striking that testimony later may simply have reinforced the worth of that testimony later on. If he didn't move to immediately strike it at the time, he may have actually done more damage than if he had just let it alone at that point. But I understand why he did that. He didn't want it in there for the appellate record. And make no mistake, there will be an appeal in this case. Will it be effective? Who knows? I think there's a I think the link to the first degree homicide is the most tenuous, and if they you get the right set of judges, they could very easily overturn that. Well, I could go on and on with this. There were so many great comments, and unfortunately, there's only so much time that I have to put together a video and get this out. I'm going to let this go on Saturday because it's been a great week. You guys have been terrific. A lot of your comments have told me where to go and what to look at and things about that. I am going to do before we get to the sentencing, I will do a video on the doctrine of merger as it relates to the merger of some of those convictions. So you can look forward to that. But for right now, thank you so much for watching my video. Come on back and see me on Monday. Thanks for watching my video. If you have a request for me to cover a topic, please send me an email to the address above, and in the subject line put video request. If you have comments, drop them in the comments down below. If you found the content worthy, please consider subscribing. Since I started doing this work, I have always asked listeners to consider doing just one kind thing every day to make somebody else smile or make their life better in some way. Please consider doing that. It makes the world a better place. Now, YouTube has some suggestions for other videos of mine you may find interesting.